Welcome into this week's edition of the Climate Friday newsletter. Meteorologist John Birchfield here. We're going to be talking record cold across the country. I know you sure felt it here in Toledo, Northwest Ohio, and Southeastern Michigan. Even though we didn't set any records here at home, there were quite a few set across the country. The cold really impacted much of the country's midsection, especially the Great Lakes region and the Great Plains, where the cold was the worst. But it even went all the way down to the south, and I'm going to be breaking down some of the numbers in areas like Texas and Oklahoma, which felt frigid temperatures as well. Good to have you here, whether you're streaming on WTOL 11 Plus, tuning into our YouTube channel, or online. You can subscribe to that Climate Friday newsletter at WTOL.com/email. And every week we break down more in-depth content that we don't have time for on air that delves in related to climate change. So let's talk about some of the records that were set across the country. In the last week, this is not surprising, but across the United States, 164 record lows have been set. And that surpasses the number of record highs, which sits at 100. Now, when you think of climate change, you think of global warming and rising temperatures, but it's important to differentiate weather versus climate. Weather is dictated by the jet stream and by the day-to-day fluctuations in the weather, whereas climate deals with more overarching trends. So in the last week, we have seen more cold than warmth across the country, and 164 record lows is a testament to that. When we go back a little bit further over the last month, well, then things start to even out. In fact, the record warmth actually wins out on the battle over the last month, looking at February as a whole. Over 5,500 record highs across the United States and just over 4,600 record lows. So the past week, certainly frigid cold across much of the United States, but the past month, we see those start to level out and actually notice warmer than normal temperatures across the country. So just how cold did it get? Let's start things off with Thursday morning lows and go backward from there. As of this recording, Toledo recorded a 15-degree morning low, which is cold, but nowhere near a record. Across the northern plains and the upper Midwest, Minneapolis got below zero, but of course up there they're a little more used to it. Bismarck minus 26, Kansas City minus 10. Now what's the most notable about this map might just be some of the cold across the south. Dallas, 12 degrees. San Antonio, 21. And down in New Orleans, 29 degrees. So it's not just the northern latitudes feeling the cold, but also much of those southern states as well. Let's go back a day. Wednesday's low temperatures getting a little colder. Toledo was at 9 degrees. Minneapolis minus 10. Bismarck minus 29. The cold really infiltrated the south on Wednesday, feeling 17 degrees in Memphis, 13 in Dallas, and Orlando, a balmy 63, one of the few warm spots in the country. And we go back a day even further. Tuesday is when the cold really was at its worst across the upper Midwest. Bismarck was at minus 39, Minneapolis at minus 15, and Chicago, the Windy City, was below zero, and that does not even factor in for the wind. Those wind chills dipped down near 50 below across parts of the upper Midwest. Dallas was at 19, Denver was at -2 on that day. So what about the Toledo Metro in particular? Well, we didn't set any records this week like much of the country did. However, we still got fairly close to our coldest readings of the season, and certainly the coldest that we have felt since January. The coldest temperature of the season so far, that is -3 degrees, and that occurred on January 22nd, when extreme cold impacted the region. Our coldest over the month of February, we did feel a 4-degree temperature reading this week on February 18th. That was Tuesday, but still shy of that seasonal low that occurred back in January. Record cold across the country was most notable up in the Dakotas. Bismarck making history with a record of -39, and that is not even factoring in for the wind. Bismarck experienced wind chills that were below -50. Hard to even fathom temperatures of that magnitude. Denver, Colorado with a record low this week of -7. Dallas, Texas, a 12-degree record low. Kansas City set a record of -9, and Oklahoma City just barely above that freezing mark, and these daily record lows occurred throughout the course of the week. Looking at records across North Dakota in particular, this is some of the coldest air that they have felt of the season. In fact, record lows occurred across much of the state as that cold Canadian air swept down across the line. Bismarck -39, Dickinson -36, Williston -28, Minot at -33, and Jamestown -27. These occurred on Tuesday, but it's important to note North Dakota had extreme cold all week long, so this is just one example of the bitter cold that impacted North Dakota. Let's talk about Toledo in particular, breaking down some of the numbers of this February cold. Now, we haven't had any records, but I think what's most noteworthy about this month is just how prolonged the chilly weather pattern has been and how long it's been since we've experienced any above average conditions. Over the course of February as a whole, we are 3.4 degrees below average. What about our average temperature? That is just 25.4. Now, February typically isn't even the coldest month of the year. Normally, we reach those coldest days in January, and we start to see somewhat of an upward tick in February. Not so much this year. When you look at those overnight lows in particular, our average overnight low is 19 degrees, and that is really pulling the average down for the month. Now, what about snowfall? Because despite the cold, snowfall's been pretty hard to come by. We had several alert days over the last couple of weeks, but most of them were more so related to ice as opposed to snow. Well, we finally got a decent snowfall. Definitely not a big snowstorm, but on Sunday we recorded the biggest snowfall of the season so far at Toledo Express with 2.1 inches of accumulation. We are still well below average in the snowfall department, and as of this recording on Thursday, just shy of 11 inches of snow accumulation in Toledo, and that puts us over 2 feet below average. Normally at this point in the season, we would have 27.7 inches on the ground. So big weather impacts going forward. After this cold snap in February, we are finally looking ahead towards a thaw out, and next week we're going to be near 40 degrees with snow melting away. Now, we could be dealing with some potential lingering impacts of that. Sometimes we get fog this time of year when the snow melts off. Could be a little bit of refreezing, but it might be a good time to salt the driveway out with some of that snow melting away. By the end of February, our normal high climbs up to 42 degrees. So if you're looking forward to spring, well, we statistically do start to inch closer to those spring-like temperatures. That being said, even though we're going to be thawing out, we're still expected to be below average through the end of the month, and even the start of March is going to be below normal. The long-range temperature outlook staying chilly. The warmth is going to be out west, cold weather across the East Coast and the Great Lakes region, so don't get too excited about a big-time warm-up, even though we'll inch closer to 40 degrees. Not expecting any major warmth on the horizon. Again, thanks for tuning in on WTOL 11 Plus, YouTube, online, whatever streaming platform is your choice. Good to have you here in the Climate Friday newsletter, and we have the latest content straight to your inbox every Friday. You can subscribe at WTOL.com/email and follow along for the latest.